mind.
Hi, Viola. It's so good to see you. Thanks so much for joining ScaleUp Africa on this conversation around wealth and impact.
It is so good to be with you, Amma. It's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
It has, it has. We've been having little conversations, but we thought this would be a really good time for us to just, hone in on what we've been thinking and what we've been experiencing and some of the solutions that we're looking for. I mean, I'm in Accra right now in Ghana, and you are in the States, and everyone's talking about G20, South Africa's presidency. It's a big agenda on the news at the moment. So I thought this would be a really good time for us to just have real conversations with women in philanthropy, in the impact
Mhm.
space, in the social enterprise space, nonprofit space, to figure out how we can innovate in the way that we are approaching the impact conversation, right? I always say,
Yes.
the revolution is not going to be funded by the big aid or big foundations.
It
It's
is
just not
going to be,
happening.
that statement is going to be with me for the foreseeable
We
future.
need some merchandise around that, maybe. Yeah, we need to actually,
Yes.
yeah. But I think some of these conversations have been bubbling under the surface, and we've
Yeah.
had some interesting conversations with people who have careers, like 30, 40-year careers in the big foundations and the big institution like USAID, which no longer exists. But I think it's really important for us to actually put some of these thoughts and ideas and models out there in the ether to see how best we can really double down on some of these new ways of thinking and make it a bit more mainstream. So that's really the agenda for the day. And I just would love to start with your personal story, because your story is amazing, your journey is amazing as an entrepreneur, as a founder. I mean, you've had a phenomenal couple of decades just doing this amazing work and leading it so flawlessly. So just tell us a bit more about your personal journey and how you've come to where you're at right now.
Well, I think some of my story is pretty typical of women like yourself and myself, and I am talking about women, Black women in the diaspora, on our beloved continent, in the Caribbean, wherever that original triangle of the slave trade was, you will find women trying to make something out of sometimes nothing or very little, very much driven by the need to either accelerate or provide or create a space for themselves to elevate thoughts and ideas that should be monetized. So when I started out in the UK, I was in the tech spaces where there was never anyone like me. 21 years old, black female with only a few O levels, one missing A level, selling multi-million dollar machines, mainframe machines to county councils and organizations where yet again no representation. But when you are blinded to the fact that there's no one else out there doing what you're doing, you're neither informed that you shouldn't, and that same lack of information is what allows you to think that you should. So whatever you believe in your head is true. So I went from selling mainframes to building disaster recovery systems for mid-range AS400 systems, which was the beginning of distributed processing and computerization as we know it today. Going in there with only half the information, because as you probably know just as much as I do, you really do not always need all the information to get started, a bit like us today. So when I came to America at the age of 26 in 1992, a green card was not unattainable. I married somebody I was deeply in love with. I had a green card and I thought, why don't I start again? Why don't I see whether I've got what it takes to stand in a different river and make something of myself? And I got into marketing, communications, government relations, and found myself to be rather decent at it. Long story short, got headhunted after spending time in US government relations by a very wealthy playboy who asked me to set up a company that would raise capital to invest in securitized life insurance policies. I had never had anything to do with big finance. But in a 5 year period of time, we had about 500 million assets under management. I had learned what it meant to put together a back office. And I learned everything I ever used on the African continent as it relates to risk, capital, and distribution. Ended up working with a young man who became my business partner in Ovamba, which ran for about 11 years in Cameroon and Central Africa, with a new way of financing small and medium enterprises, because banking does not lead to financial inclusion, and Africans do not have digital ownership of who and what we are. The greatest thing Africans own is our culture and our youth and our ability to learn very quickly and leapfrog things that don't serve us. So digitizing culture, digitizing tribalism, embedding that into credit systems and models so that we could use alternative trade and finance and Islamic finance as a way to give women a different form of access, especially those bayam selams, as they call them, and the idea that the rest of the world has a stereotypical idea of what an African woman in business looks like. She looks like you, me, and everybody else we've ever met. We just do it under slightly different circumstances. So when I did that and actually sold the company to the staff and went home, that's when you and I started to get a lot more cheek by jowl after I found myself working in the non and not for profit space and launched a consultancy called PROPhaze Consulting. And that's where I allow everything I've ever learned to become the art of the pivot. And that's where we are today.
That's where we are today. Quite the pivot as well. But I love the journey because it's always about bringing it all together, all of those experiences together into something that you can now launch into the world. So tell us a bit about PROPhaze and how you are rethinking and reimagining how finance works. You talked about finance, and we always talk about finance as a tool for good. We talk about wealth, we talk about impact. But what is your framework through PROPhaze at the moment?
Well, it's a bit like Kismet. When you and I were speaking last year while I was in Nairobi, there were only whispers about the ending of USAID, but it slammed on us with so much unexpected finality. But for a long time, I had been saying African nations and emerging markets cannot build their nations and their societies on charity. If we're standing on majority of the world's wealth with a youth bulge bracket that should be educated to monetize talent, even before education, I sometimes say, then we should be in a very different space. If we're being overwhelmed with the idea that soft diplomacy and influence has to go hand in hand with I'll give you small money so that you can have a few small controlled results so that we can go away and make big impact statements, then something's got to be disrupted. What's the best way in which to do that? So explaining and understanding that a lot of people don't know the difference between non-profit and not-for-profit. I saw an opportunity for what I consider to be a hybrid asset class. What if we take the best and the benchmark practices of the small and medium enterprise and the private sector and took those best practices and embedded them into non and not for profit organizations so that they can actually monetize their activity? The data is very, very wealthy. And those people that have the good heart to finance and fund these groups, they want accountability. They want to see more bang for their buck. There's a much greater requirement to produce meaningful, measurable results from the infusion of capital into problems that would otherwise fell an elephant for the size and impact that they have. So I work with funders and the private sector, small and medium enterprise, in making sure that when they put their money somewhere, those groups for whom I have an affinity, both culturally and financially and business wise, I understand all of those issues. In fact, I mean, you know, most Black women, we're three-legged beasts. We have a leg in the Western world, in our cultures, and in the world of what it means to not have so much and do a lot more. That's what we're really bringing to the table in a very polished way, making sure that capital placed produces huge impact leads people down a prescribed pathway to growth, and that the ability to respond to imminent change or unplanned change is sequenced and choreographed in such a way that the impact that you focused on continues to stay by ensuring that the teams that have to pivot together are actually trained to change together. There's nothing like change to scatter the roaches in the kitchen when the lights go on.
That's true. And change is the only constant, as we keep saying, right?
Only
So
makes you
how
powerful.
would you plug into all the like we're seeing all these big global conversations, G20, everyone's talking about global
Mm.
leaders and a lot of talk shopping, and a lot of people are getting very jaded with these conferences and conversations. How would you, if you were to speak to a world leader today, how would you pitch PROPhaze as the approach or the thinking, the solution? to moving forward to solve
Well,
some of our sticky problems.
it's no spoiler alert to say that a lot of these groups are way too big and senior to actually understand what it means to have boots on the ground, number one. They cannot see the minutiae of the dynamics that are required, and they cannot see the realities of what go on while also trying to envision a future that often requires them to prove a point to other people, but not necessarily solve the problem of the people who are impacted. So, what PROPhaze is able to do is to help companies protect their purpose whilst defining and redefining impact. Impact, from an African perspective, is the art of winning, and winning is business. Otherwise, why are you doing it? Everything has a price, everything has a cost. Nobody does things for the sake of graceful losing. That's what you do when you lose a cricket game on the Oval in the UK, isn't it? But not for us. We cannot afford to lose. There are many things we have to win at in many different ways. So if I were to pitch some of these larger groups, I would explain that there is a bridge and a causeway that requires digitization and monetization and a clear extractive data process in order for you to continue to do the good that is required for organizations to grow. You can no longer look at growth as a single serving activity. There is no growth for emerging markets if it doesn't lead to the next stage, the next, until you are no longer required. It is a brave act to retire yourself from an activity, but it is necessary if you're going to master the pivot. Every single NGO, not for profit business should be looking for a way to retire themselves from their current place in order to build the next level of growth for people coming behind them. So if these leaders are interested in legacy and profit, they need to speak to PROPhaze Consulting. If the funders and the grantors are looking to show that their impact actually has lasting growth ability, they should be speaking to PROPhaze to ensure that anything they've missed is uncovered and that the groups that they're funding are growing. That's the capacity building that everybody talks about.
Yeah, thanks, Viola. I was very interested to maybe rewind a little bit
Sure.
to your story about Ovamba and really enabling your
Mm-hmm.
employees to buy the company. Because, we talk
Yes.
about wealth and ownership. And I think these are some of the things that we should be promoting. We should be promoting in the SME early stage investment space that as an option. How do you get employees to become owners and managers? And how do
By
we
retiring myself.
Exactly. So it's really about making yourself obsolete or making the existing model
Yes,
obsolete so that people can sustain themselves, right? So that's exactly how you did it.
exactly.
Yeah.
To empower others means you need the hubris to know when you're no longer needed. But let's look at what's going on with the G20 and let's look at Cameroon today. Paul Biya will be 100 years old at the end of his next term. Those people who were at the apex of their productivity will have been expired out of the system, having provided no value to the whole. This is a dangerous thing for leadership to exist in such a vacuum that they're blind to the mood music, which is a strange thing to say that you're blind to sound, but that's really what I mean. So when I had the staff, first of all, my management style was different. I will be honest and say that the business partner I had at the time felt that my mothering behavior didn't have a place in business. I'm sorry, I cannot help that. When a woman is fully integrated, they bring the best of everything they've got. And
Yeah,
I'm a nurturer.
the female characteristics of and bringing your full self to that space, right?
Exactly.
Right.
I am proud to say that I'm one of the few CEOs and presidents that when I walk in the room, my staff would mob me with hugs and conversations because I recognized that they are providing us the best times, the best years, the best of their creativity and their skill set to come to work every single day through that horrific traffic, knowing that they're living in a nation where you cannot even tell your children that they can be anything they want to be, because until the head of the beast is dead or cut off, which it will not be, they'll stitch it back on, they are completely truncated to the worst that their environment has to offer with the hopes that they'll get through it. This is not something that I care to add to or to encourage. So I had the leader of the the office in Cameroon in November, used to be our driver. But when you look at skill and brilliance under the lens of an emerging market, you need different tool sets and a different index. What could you possibly find in terms of leadership capability in a guy who's a driver? What you notice is they know everybody. They can code switch for on your behalf when you're just one of us diaspora. You've come and you want to work in your country, but you haven't been there long enough to know what it actually feels like. You need trusted people. So working with Avamba and building alternative trade systems and making sure that I rotated the learning of people every August. I did not allow people to become comfortable in their job where they start to develop a fiefdom. And just like the computing systems that I'd grown up with, I distributed power. I did not make myself the head of the beast. I'm an enabler. An enabler sits side by side. An enabler can knows and anticipates, just like women. All women, all mothers who run a household have to ensure that there are resources for the people that they care for. I did that, whether it was informal learning, coaching, or just being a listening ear. If somebody wanted a long conversation with me, I either took them walking or made them sit with me at the nail salon. Now let me hear what you got to say. All women have to ensure that they nurture the talent of their children, their families, and champion their spouses in some way. I did exactly that. These are the same things that the CEOs at Google do. Do not be fooled. Leadership is taking the best of your team and giving them a platform by which to monetize their talents or to develop a sense of personal satisfaction while doing something with you, for you, or on your behalf. And then you retire yourself because if you're staying there, you as a leader, you're not growing. You have just completely excoriated your growth trajectory. You should be going on to do something else. Not even retirement is an excuse. So selling the company to the staff, they don't run Ovamba the way I did. Ovamba was an alternative trade finance company. Ovamba in Cameroon right now is a systems integrator and innovator. They have taken the best of what they've got to respond to the challenges in that country. G20 presidents, you asked at the beginning questions, and we had this comment about are they really just talking heads? Are they actually doing anything that can help? And I say they're too far up in the sky to see what's really done. Neither do they know how to pivot with any agility. They're too big, not too big to fail. They need to fail. Failure is one of your greatest lessons. And they don't really understand because they're not serving. They're catering to those people with purse strings. And there's so much insincerity there. I spoke at Davos, both summer and winter Davos. I heard great initiatives discussed, but I haven't seen the plight of the woman who is pounding fufu change. Not yet. How much trickle down are we waiting for? Do we wait for the flood and drown the people? Or do we keep people parched and thirsty and know that as long as people are waiting and are desirous of change, you think you still have a right to sit on whatever chair you're sitting on that you are calling a throne? Well, unfortunately, toilets are also called thrones. So are you really doing any good? Not so much. And I'll stop there because I'll get political and I don't want to.
On a roll, Viola, on a roll. So just moving on to innovating in terms of how wealth shows up, right? There are
Mm,
people that are, we talk to a lot of people, philanthropies, foundations, family offices, and we hear a lot
mhm.
of high net worth individuals tell us that they're a little bit jaded with, the galas and just writing checks and just turning up. And it's like they want something more. So what would you say to someone who is thinking about a new way of supporting real sustainable systems change and impact with their wealth and their privilege, no matter where their wealth came from, because we know wealth has many different backstories, right?
Yes.
But for someone who is in that position, and a lot of people in the ScaleUp Africa community tend to have these conversations with us on a regular basis, what would you say to them?
I would say tear the whole thing down and start again. It's not the galas and the attracting of the glitterati who want to show up and then write a big check. First of all, you've just spent a large amount of money on ingesting things that your body's only renting. And at the end of 3 days, you might not even remember the name of the person that sat next to you. But what I would recommend is that they speak to people like you, Amma, that they speak to people like me, that they engage in a story tour of places, that they work with people like you and I who can sit down and say, here are the list of challenges, and these are the geographical places where they are. Here is the psychological impact. Here is the long-term generational impact. And here are where the stories, those truthful stories told, where you can on the spot do something about it. And when you are financing and funding these non-profit organizations and not for profit organizations, invest in structuring them in such a way that when they pivot, they still have the same focus. And when they are using the capital that you're putting in place, use it in a way that is business minded. Many times they won't even allow the organization to use that money for operational uses or to buy technology or to invest in AI or any of those things. They start looking for what they think are the earmarks of Western success. Success and wealth don't look the same on either side of the divide, whether it's the digital divide, the poverty divide, success divide, gender divide, you name it, it won't always look the same. But through storytelling, through tours, where you actually sit down and spend time with people and take a look for yourself and then adjust those agreements and the capital that you give and put in place the ability for them to become profitable, but profitable through very specific activities where that money and the returns are moved into structures that can become very evergreen, can be generative, and make the cost of capital so much less. The cost of capital is going up. This is a tax on the poor. We should make the poor able to generate that capital and increase its velocity so its impact is very measurable. When I ran Ovamba and left from the idea of trying to do lending, because I did not want us to have a banking license, I did short-term trade. The minute that money comes in, it went back out again.
Turn it
So you
around.
start to, yeah, it turns around. You've heard people talk about how long does it take for a dollar to circulate in a neighborhood? That is a very important piece of data to measure in terms of impact, but they don't often think about that. What happens if you decide to create or invest in a portfolio from the business sector and have that money returned in a very specific way? That's one of the things I loved about Islamic finance that I bring into what PROPhaze does. You find things that will drive industry, drive culture, drive CSOs, and use that same money to do more of the same without giving the cow away with the milk. I really do believe that that whole rooter to tutor approach to maximizing and operations is a central piece to the new way in which I think philanthropy needs to be done.
I totally agree. As always, I mean, we have so many thoughts and just paradigm. The paradigm is very much aligned, and I think that's where, when you talk about operational capacity and management capacity, that's a huge gap in terms of, different types of
Yes.
funding and how resources are managed operationally. Like, I think that's a huge part of what we are also trying to do to enable and, like you said, build the capacity of organizations that are social and impact focused, and looking at how we can look at long-term solutions and long-term capacity building. So I think these are
Yeah.
things that we should definitely be focusing on and we continue to focus on. And I like the fact that you mentioned the tours, because we're really looking at ramping up our promotions of our ScaleUp Africa tour, where we will bring folks who are really interested in the impact space to come and see some of the projects, meet some of the communities, just see what some of the initiatives are on the ground. As you say, it's great to have a helicopter view, but being on the ground is a very different sense of what is needed and
Very
how we
much.
should be approaching our development goals and our socioeconomic needs. So, Viola, thank you so much. I think we're fast spent on time, but we will definitely continue the conversation offline. There's much to do together, and I really appreciate you joining us and making time for us.
I'm thrilled and grateful. Thank you, Amma. You do such great work. I'm going to be like you when I grow up.
I did say I'm still chasing you, Miss Obamba. Thank you so
We
much.
run together.
Yes. Great, that was good. A lot there. I can't wait to kind of distill some of the nuggets.
You've got to use this title. The revolution is not going to be financed. You're so genius, Amma. It led me down a
Yeah.
road that made it very easy to have this conversation.
Okay, okay, good. Good. I'm glad because I didn't want it to be like, what do you do? What do you work? Like it's like these are the things that we need to actually
Yeah,
get
how
up.
you're
Yeah.
seeing problems and how they're being fixed.
How they're being fixed and how they're being resourced long term. So,
Yeah.
and what you said about the asset class, like even just turning things around, how would you turn around that money? Like it's trade.
Yeah.
It's like how do you connect the dots so that that money can circulate even further? For that dollar,
Yeah.
how long does it stay within the community? And these are the things. Like we import so much.
Oh
Like in
my
Ghana, like
word.
we import so much. It's like we have everything it takes to produce, but we import everything. And it's cheaper
Like
to
I said, I
import.
don't like to get political on these because I was shocked to find I actually have a political mindset, but I'm not comfortable with it. When I think about the G20 African things that need to be changed, yes, well done for getting rid of USAID. So when are we going to build factories?
Yeah,
When are we going to be an outsource for assembly? Nigeria used to assemble VW cars back in the 60s.
I know.
People have
My mom
forgotten.
always says, my mom is 75 now. She always
Yeah,
says we've gone backwards. She says,
we
look,
have
in
gone
the
very
when she
backwards.
was growing up, she in like in Kumasi, in the Ashanti region of
Mm,
Ghana,
mm,
there were nail factory, they were manufacturing
yeah,
nails to do construction. We had silos like full to the brim with grains.
yeah.
We had so much. And it's like everything's gone backwards. Everything's gone backwards, and it's like
If the nation
I
doesn't
yeah,
produce,
it's ridiculous. And even this whole plastic crisis that we have. I remember coming to Ghana as a kid from London every once in a while. Recycling was just part of what we did. You know, the crates with
yeah,
the glass bottles, and then
yeah,
slowly you come back to Ghana and say, "Oh, it's all plastic bottles." And now we're talking about recycling, and I'm like, let's just go back to basics. Just go back to
we
basics.
really do. But I think that hermetically speaking, systems have a way of rising and falling and
Yeah,
reinventing and recycling.
right.
This is normal.
Yeah.
Even, and there's always a part of it where it's the worst before it becomes better. I would love to be able to hear what some of the older generation have seen and witnessed and where they think that future is going to take them. Whether they're right or wrong isn't even the point. The fact that they even have a narrative about it is important.
That's a really, really good point. It's something we should maybe hone in on and capture. I think that's a really, really important conversation because a lot of us don't know. They don't know where we came from, like where in terms of the
No,
journey and how we got to this point where it's just such a distressing situation with a bigger population and all the metrics that are just it's a ticking time, you know.
it
Viola,
really,
thank you
really
so
is.
much. Thank you so much. I'm gonna hop off now. But we
Sure.
should catch up properly
Let me know what I
and
can do to help with this
yes.
in a post-production perspective.
Okay. So you're all set up with post-production. What's going on? Viola Studios coming through?
I'm thinking of doing. I've bought equipment. I'm trying to do stuff. Yeah,
Ooh,
I've some cameras, some microphones, some cameras, so a bunch of different things.
okay.
And meeting with my friend Julian Kiganda, the Uganda girl who I do work with, she has a phenomenal podcast and she puts it together, pennies on the dollar. So I want to bring this
Ooh,
learning to you. She's got
yeah.
the music, she's got the intro, she's got the outro, she's got the this.
Oh my
I
gosh.
want in on that.
Yes, yes. I will do what I can. Let me think about how I'm still trying to figure this out. So
Yeah.
let's figure it out together and see how best to get this out there packaged nicely. But yeah, this was really juicy. Thank you very much. I knew it would be. But you look after yourself and the fam,
I
yeah?
appreciate it.
Yeah. We'll talk
Yeah.
soon. Thanks so much.
Take care, dear.
Bye.
Bye.